This is 5 Live Formula One with Jenny Gow.
Good morning. How are you today, this fine Saturday? Good. Hopefully you're absolutely fine. Now, Red Bull and Ferrari have taken all the spoils so far this season. Admittedly, it's only round 3, but it's the Australian Grand Prix from Albert Park in Melbourne. Who will rise to the top today in qualifying? We're just about to put an hour on the clock and see who can go fastest around this part street circuit, part race permanent circuit that has changed a lot over the last couple of years since we've been away, and it is great to be back after the COVID flop, I suppose, of 2020. We are back racing around the streets and by the lovely lake there. And okay, there are some grey clouds above, but that shouldn't dispel any of the excitement set for qualifying. At the moment, it is Charles Leclerc that leads the way in the championship with 45 points from his teammate Carlos Sainz, who has 33 points, and Max Verstappen, 25 points. That's the top 3. Mercedes seem nowhere. Let's find out what's going to happen over this next hour. Harry Benjamin joins us as lead commentator this weekend. And Harry, it's a great Grand Prix. It's always a fantastic weekend in Melbourne. And I think qualifying should live up to the hype.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so far, free practice, there's been nothing in it between certainly Red Bull and Ferrari. McLaren showing a turn of pace, as are Alpine, but it does look like it's going to be a battle between the Red Bulls and Ferraris once more. The track changes as well. Most of the track has been widened. It's faster. 3 DRS zones. We got rid of another one overnight. So it's going to be fast. It's going to be furious. You don't want to miss it.
Mark, obviously, Mark Priestley is here with us. Sorry, Mark, didn't even introduce you. So excited was I to talk to you. Former F1 mechanic. It's been 2 hours since we had free practice 3 and an eventful free practice session going into qualifying. The teams will all have been working incredibly hard to try and get their heads around what they need going into this session.
Yeah, that's right. So the 3 practice sessions we've had, 2 yesterday, 1 earlier on today, were all about fine-tuning these new cars, of course, brand new cars for 2022 on a new circuit or a new variation of this circuit. So there's a lot of unknowns into this weekend. So it's all been about fine-tuning the tyres and the car setup, getting it ready for this moment now where the laps that come in this qualifying session really do matter. They're going to be on low fuel. This is going to be as fast as you're going to see these cars all weekend. So everything's been about making small tweaks. That's what it's been for most people. Of course, a couple of teams who had problems, notably the Aston Martin team, with both cars crashing out in FP3. For that team, they've been incredibly busy, desperately trying to repair those cars just to get them onto the circuit for qualifying.
Yeah, and that's looking more and more unlikely for Sebastian Vettel. They've had to change the gearbox out on that car. No penalty for that, but the floor is still off. Floor just going back on for Lance Stroll. So let's see what Aston Martin can do. Certainly not an ideal day for them. Now, Harry, last time we were here, 19, Hamilton set pole position for the 1 minute 20.486. Times are going to be faster, and I think it's fair to say Hamilton's got as much chance of being on pole position as I have, running around the track in a time that would be anywhere near suitable.
Yeah, it's a shame because Australia has been happy hunting ground for Hamilton in the past. 6 consecutive poles for Hamilton. Unlikely to make that a thing today. Of course, he's only won twice, but the pole sitter of the Australian Grand Prix has only won 1 of the last 8 Grand Prix, and that was Hamilton back in 2015. So getting pole position doesn't necessarily guarantee you the win.
Yeah, and that's been the way this season, hasn't it? Really, okay, Leclerc got the first pole position and went on to win the race, but Verstappen's car died away. And it was Verstappen who won from 4th on the grid last time. So plenty of variation out there. Doesn't mean to say just because you're the fastest man on a Saturday that you can go on and win the race. But I tell you what, every single driver out there would love to get a pole position around these streets of Albert Park. We have about 30 seconds to go until session gets underway. So let's cross over to the commentary team. And let's hope that we have a really good, clean session with not many red flags.
Well, you've jinxed it now, haven't you? Thank you very much, Jenny Gow. Yeah, I'll do a little countdown for you. 5 seconds to go. So if you're watching on the telly, you can sync up with us. But welcome back to, Melbourne Albert Park. 3 years since the last qualifying took place. It was Lewis Hamilton on that day. Bottas, though, went on to take the win. And in 4, 3, 2, Qualifying for Q1 is underway, where we will lose 5 cars from this first session to begin setting the grid. And out straight away, Mark Priestley, is the Haas of Kevin Magnussen, Alex Albon and Mick Schumacher as well. And, well, Haas and Williams have been struggling all season long so far. I know we're only 3 races in, but Haas have looked remarkably strong, but been a bit anonymous so far this weekend. So they'll be aiming to try and get out of Q1.
Well, they will, and they'll be probably slightly buoyed by the fact that a team that's been often in front of them, Aston Martin, have had so many struggles because, you know, will we even see 2 Aston Martins on the track? If we don't, that takes up immediately one of those 5 slots. It looks like Lance Stroll about to climb into his car. So on that side of the garage, the car almost ready, but slightly more work to do on the opposite side for Sebastian Vettel. We'll wait and see if he makes it or not. But yeah, this is going to be crucial for those guys at the back there. Just finding the couple of tenths here or there could be the difference between packing your bags early and going home or getting through to Q2.
Absolutely. Well, as we see images of the mechanics in Aston Martin working hard, it's not been an ideal start to his 2022 campaign for Sebastian Vettel. We're hearing it will be unlikely he'll get out in time. On track, though, we're watching one of the Ferraris make their way round Charles Leclerc following Carlos Sainz. And actually, it's, I should say Carlos Sainz following Charles Leclerc. But actually, McLaren have brought some more pace this time around. Norris topped FP3. Admittedly, it was a red flag truncated session. Ricciardo about half a second back so far. They'll be buoyed by that progress.
They definitely will, because the weekend didn't start particularly well for them. The season, in fact, hasn't started particularly well. After a couple of years where they've been building back towards what looks like more and more success. Of course, they had that amazing 1-2 finish in Monza last year, with Daniel Ricciardo taking the win. It's looked like they were heading back towards the front, and this year they've taken a step back with these brand new cars. But here, this weekend, we saw a stunning lap from Lando Norris. Very low fuel, but that's what everyone was practicing for, of course, for qualifying. That's what we're on now. Soft tyres, low fuel. As I said, the ultimate pace from these cars, and so far it looks like that McLaren has a bit more pace than we perhaps expected in it.
Former chief McLaren F1 mechanic Mark Priestley, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin, Jenny Gow here as well, as we start these first proper flyers. Charles Leclerc begins his lap around this 3.2 mile, 5.2 kilometre altered circuit. It's about 24 metres shorter than previous, 14 turns, so we've lost 2 corners, the old 9 and 10. Now the new turns 9 and 10 is that fast left to right. We did have 4 DRS zones at the start of this weekend. We have since lost the DRS zone that runs between turns 8 and 9. That is due to safety reasons. We're hearing, because it's not quite as straight, it's actually more of a bit of a left-hander as Charles Leclerc makes his way on that very part of the circuit now. He set a personal overall best, I should say, in the first sector. Albon slots in his first lap time of 1:21.1, immediately displaced by Schumacher, who goes a few thousandths of a second quicker than him. We're in the 1:21.1s at the moment, but expect that pace to tumble down, because actually we've seen so far with these new tyres, you need a warm-up lap more often than not to get the best out of it.
Quite often, yeah. We've got a few more degrees of temperature on the track and ambient temperature than yesterday. Not a lot, just a couple of degrees, but Charles Leclerc closing out his lap now. A couple of twitches of understeer that I saw him struggling with there, but he goes top of the timesheets with a 1:19.39. We've got yellow flags in Sector 3 for somebody, and a feature of the weekend so far has been mistakes. These cars are on the ragged edge of performance. They are balancing on a knife edge here, the drivers, which is great to watch, but it does mean we get mistakes. And on a circuit like this, when you get mistakes and drivers going off, even into the gravel, the walls are very close. Expect to see delays through potential stoppages. And as we get into the race tomorrow, safety cars, virtual safety cars, the whole lot.
And in some cases, the walls have been brought even closer in with these track changes, particularly coming out of the final corner, which is where Lando Norris is now. That is the sound you're hearing as we ride on board with Norris, who crosses the line and goes second with a 1:19.7 right now. So only 8 cars have set competitive lap times right now. So still all to play for. 13 minutes, 22:21, 20 seconds on the clock. Max Verstappen beginning his first flying lap right now, coming through Sector 1. He's up on Leclerc at the moment.
We've seen a real struggle for Max Verstappen in the earlier session today, where the car just wasn't in the window where he liked it. Traffic is going to be a big issue during the early part of this session. Max Verstappen weaving his way through a couple of slower cars on their outlap. That could be a real challenge for people. Max, though, through sector 2 is still just about up. Bounces over the curbs, opens his DRS as he comes through to the very fast rear section of the circuit here. Perez, his teammate, also going quickly in the middle sector. Let's see if he can hang on to the end of this lap, because he really has struggled. But have they managed to make tweaks between the sessions that make this car a bit more drivable? Coming to the last couple of corners then, Max Verstappen out of the final turn as Sainz tops the timesheets. What can Max Verstappen do with his Red Bull? And he crosses the line with a 1:19.4 to put himself currently third place.
Meanwhile, his teammate just behind him has gone faster in the middle sector. Sergio Perez, off the back of scoring his first ever pole position in Saudi Arabia, slots into second, a tenth and a half back from Carlos Sainz with a 1:19.1. So it's Ferrari, Red Bull right now, the top 4. But we're looking mainly at the cars we're going to lose from this session. One of them might be Williams' Nicholas Latifi, who just avoids keeping it out of the walls. He skirts the gravel, that is the sound you heard there, and just loses the rear, but keeps it nearly pointing in the same direction, locks the front tyres and keeps it turned in, but not the start to his qualifying. Williams struggling hugely at the moment with, well, not just one point of the car, the entire car.
They really are, yeah. That was as close to a spin as you could get without actually spinning. He just about recovered that from going all the way around, Nicholas Latifi. It's been a feature of his season so far, unfortunately for him. But he continues, albeit with a completely destroyed first set of soft tyres on that car. So back to the pits he'll go for a new set and have another attempt. So at the moment it's Carlos Sainz who leads from Perez. It's the two drivers who've been second in those two front teams right now that are currently topping the sheets, with Charles Leclerc third and Max Verstappen currently fourth.
And Charles Leclerc currently coming to the end of a quick lap as well. The Alpines have been looking strong this weekend, particularly in the hands of Fernando Alonso, who's currently going around to set his first fastest lap right now. Leclerc goes fastest with a 1:18.881, so the times really are coming down. The Q3 time last year, last time we were here in 2019 was a 1:24, so we've already surpassed that. Time's expected to be at least 5 seconds quicker in qualifying. Alonso making his way down now to the fast left right-hander, the new turn 9 and 10 into the final DRS zone before we then get to the next one, which will be on the main straight. He makes his way down, purple in the middle sector, into the braking zone of the newly reprofiled and widened turn 11, keeps it pointing in the same direction. Little bit of traffic, it gets out of the way through 12 into the braking of 13, chucks it into the left, carry as much speed as you can out of the final corner, take a bit of curb on exit, DRS wide open and a run down to the line. What can this do for Fernando Alonso? It puts him in fifth with a 1:19.653 for the Spaniard, about 7/10 off right now.
Yeah, I feel like there might even be more time in that car. It's a decent Alpine that they've got this weekend. I'm actually wondering if some cars might have had a benefit coming from the loss of that fourth DRS zone. Some cars, of course, have a better, more efficient DRS feature on their car than others. The fact that it changes speeds through there, some cars are quicker through that section anyway. There might be some changing of the order as a result of that late change that we saw ahead of FP3, but the Alpine looking fairly strong this weekend, perhaps better than we've seen in recent times.
Hashtag BBC F1 if you want to get involved as well. Great to have you along with us. We're looking right now at losing our first few drivers from Q1. Currently, the majority of them have not set a lap time. We're waiting for Hamilton, Russell, Stroll and Vettel to set a lap time, but of course the two Aston Martin cars of Stroll and Vettel had huge shunts in free practice 3. It's a race against time to get them to actually take part. So in that case, it's looking like Hamilton and Russell, they've still got to set a lap time to see where they stand. But of course, Mark, Hamilton coming off the back of being eliminated in Q1 in Saudi Arabia for the first time on pure pace for a long old time, since Silverstone 2009.
Yeah, that was a shock, wasn't it, to him as much as it was to anybody else. They're not looking quite that bad at this stage, and I would expect them to be firmly in the middle of the pack somewhere, but they're heading out now on their first forays onto the circuit. Max Verstappen has just gone second with a good lap that's just 44 1/1000ths off the time of Leclerc. Nothing between those two. We saw difficulties for both drivers in the practice sessions, just trying to fine-tune the balance. But when it comes to it, when they really have to push and under the pressure that qualifying brings, nothing between Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. And if that's the way this season continues, we're in for a treat.
The sound you're hearing is on board with the Mercedes driver of Lewis Hamilton. 7-time world champion starts his first flying lap now. They have on average been about 7/10ths off the pace so far this season. What can they deliver in qualifying today as Russell starts his lap time as well behind him? It looks like they're going for a warm-up lap and then going fast and flat out to get the most out of these new, bigger Pirelli tyres. Mercedes, the team struggling most at the moment, visibly at least, with porpoising, but there's a lot more issues with this Mercedes car right now. Saying that, Hamilton goes over 3.5 tenths up in the first sector, keeping it nice and tidy, but it's on the run down really to turn 9, the new half straight, that you can really hear the truncating noise of the porpoising of the air being distilled underneath the car. He chucks it into the left-hander of 9, into the right-hander of 10, back out onto the DRS. He's up again, but Russell going quick as well.
He's only up on Tsunoda, who's in P15, and he's lost it.
He's lost it going into turn 11 as well. A couple of goes on the steering wheel, so losing more time at the moment, but up on Tsunoda to get out of Q1 right now, but not really challenging the top 5.
No, the car's a real handful. It has been all weekend, in fact it has been all season, and they haven't made many inroads really. Hamilton puts himself just inside the top 10, drops down to P11, so I mean nothing yet to show any signs of promise for either of those Mercedes. It's just a real struggle to drive. You feel sorry for the guys behind the wheel. They're fighting it all the way around the lap. There's a huge element of this that comes from tyre temperature. Tyre temperature makes such a big difference to the amount of grip the car has, and Mercedes don't seem to be able to get their car into that correct window on a consistent basis. Max Verstappen, though, on a hot lap.
He is. George Russell slotted into 10th, so just pipped his teammate by a couple of tenths as well. So Mercedes running 10th and 11th at the moment. Max Verstappen pushing hard to get a better lap time in as well. Stroll and Vettel still yet to lead the pit, so it's looking at the moment like Latifi, Tsunoda and Zhou are in the fight to get out of the elimination zone. 16th, 17th and 18th they currently occupy. Max Verstappen, though, goes fastest with a 1:18.5, nearly, well, yes, 3/10 clear from Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Alonso, Bottas the top 5, then it's Norris, Perez, Ocon, Ricciardo, Russell the top 10 right now.
I think we're just seeing a replay of Lewis Hamilton with massive understeer. I think that might have been, what was that, turn 11 maybe? Huge understeer, just fighting the car all the way around. Here's Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, we heard the bouncing there. Was crazy. Copy it.
Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari complaining about the porpoising on that Ferrari too, the up and down bouncing that we're seeing. In fact, it is affecting quite badly the Ferrari as well, but they've still got outright pace, whereas you compare that to Mercedes and they don't, and that's the issue here.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's been a lot of talk of this porpoising, but as we were discussing earlier, it's not the only issue that Mercedes have. They've got bigger problems with that particular car, inherent problems that are preventing them generating the pace they need, and also the changes that they might expect to have an effect. The changes they're making in the garage to overcome some of the problems that they would normally make don't seem to be having the same impact they would expect them to have. So it puts you in a really confusing situation as a team and as a driver when the normal solutions just aren't working.
Good news for Aston Martin. Lance Stroll has left the pit lane to try and set a competitive lap time, but right now with just over 4 minutes remaining at Q1, it's Verstappen and Perez leading, and Zhou is currently 16th in the elimination zone. Jenny?
Yeah, Sebastian Vettel still in the pits. Doesn't look like he's going to get out in the Aston Martin. And just listening across to Max Verstappen's team radio, he's been told your time is safe, but we will stay out. Lots of different options with cool laps, double warm-up laps, all sorts of things going on out there. It's a really different tyre this weekend.
Yeah, they've actually suffered with graining particularly on the soft tyres yesterday, again this morning, which is this problem where you don't spend enough time or put enough care into the warm-up phase of that tyre. If it overheats on the surface, rather than building the core temperature up gradually, you get this graining effect where the surface just rips off and you end up losing grip, and it actually exacerbates the whole problem. It's a real key challenge for all of the drivers, but Red Bull seem to be suffering perhaps more than others because their car seems to be lower downforce, gives them that top speed, but it does make the car and the tyres suffer through the corners.
Times changing all the time right now. Just over 3 minutes to go in Q1, and we've just seen the Hasses set a couple of fast lap times at the moment. The drivers at risk are Alex Albon in 15th. He has a 3-place grid penalty for an incident with Lance Stroll last time out in Saudi Arabia. Magnussen down in 16th. Then it's Zhou and Latifi in 8th. Stroll on an outlap. Vettel still not out of the pit lane, although actually that graphic has just disappeared, but on my timing screen it does still say he's in the pit lane, so we'll keep you abreast of that one. But work to do for the Williamses and the Hasses as well, especially the Hasses. They've really looked a bit anonymous this weekend. Mick Schumacher only just safe at the moment in 15th.
Yeah, the fact that Sebastian Vettel hasn't made it out the garage, and he's got probably less than a minute, in fact definitely less than a minute, it's very unlikely he's now going to get out and set a lap time. That does mean that's one place that's already accounted for in this bottom 5, and that is crucial for the cars that are around that area. The cars like the Williams and the Haas this weekend that normally would be occupying those places, there's one place already gone, so a little bit of hope for the likes of potentially Albon.
Big incident
crash
there as we see the Williams car spin out.
Oh dear, that is a
huge incident for Nicholas Latifi, who
again.
That's taken every corner nearly of the car off. His head's moving, and he is moving in the cockpit as well. He's come to a halt, and I think that might be I have to get the driver tracker out, but I think where is that?
It's a red flag, so the session comes to an end and the clock does stop in qualifying with 2 minutes and 1 second. Now that could be crucial for Sebastian Vettel. Could Sebastian use this time to get his car out onto the circuit and actually use that one lap that he could potentially get to set a representative lap time? That could be something for him, but Lance Stroll has taken a hit in that collision with the Williams that we haven't seen a replay of yet, but Lance Stroll also now stopped on the circuit with a broken car.
Well, here we go then. We're taking a look at it now. Lance Stroll comes through on Nicholas Latifi. That is coming through turn 5, and then Stroll just comes across, hits Latifi's rear left on the run down to turn 6, and that completely sends Latifi into a spin, destroys his rear left tyre.
Latifi, man, what is he just doing? You just hit me, man.
I'm sorry, Lance. I see that very differently, I have to say. The closing speed of Nicholas Latifi, they're both on warm-up laps. The closing speed, though, of Latifi was very, very fast. He came through. They're all jostling for position, trying to find a space on the circuit. Lance Stroll opened up a huge gap on the inside. For me, Latifi went for it, absolutely within his right to do so. They're both swapping positions. And it looked like Lance Stroll saw him coming, and for me, he turned in on him. He was already well alongside, and he turned in. So I'm sorry, Lance. Nicholas didn't hit you. It was the other way around.
I don't understand what he was doing.
Are you okay?
He wasn't looking in his mirrors.
Are you okay?
The car's destroyed.
Nicholas Latifi there, really indicating that, well, it's hard to disagree with you, Mark, looking at it on the screens as well, especially it's not exactly a blind run down to turn 6 either. It's near enough a straight with a slight kink down the middle, but I suppose the confusion came from Latifi initially letting Stroll through, and then Stroll suddenly slowing down. Latifi was ready to go again, and that has led into a huge incident that has ripped the entire rear end off of that Williams.
Yeah.
He won't get out again, certainly not. That does affect Lance Stroll as well, who was stopped out on track, and more damage to that Aston Martin as we see pictures of Lance Stroll trying to find a way out from the circuit. 2 minutes and 1 second on the clock. The red flag has stopped the clock, so in the elimination zone at the moment for Q1 we would lose Albon, Magnussen, Latifi, Stroll and Vettel. Vettel doesn't look like he's going anywhere. He hasn't set a lap time.
Well, you say that. Vettel's got his crash helmet on, and this red flag stoppage gives his team the opportunity to get that car into a situation with 2 minutes on the clock. He could get round on an outlap and cross the line before the flag comes out to get one shot at setting a lap. So this could be an opportunity for them.
Schumacher on the bubble as well in 15th, just behind Zhou Guanyu, and Latifi's teammate Albon was saying before qualifying that there could well be a huge shunt here this weekend. Hopefully it was not him, but unfortunately it's turned out to be his teammate, Jenny.
Yeah, just looking at Aston Martin, Mike Crack, who's the team principal, you've got a feel for this team because every session now, Vettel hasn't been able to complete. He missed the first 2 races with COVID. Now you look at Lance Stroll's car. He'd been on track and they'd managed to fix that car for approximately 5 minutes before he crashed again, or was crashed into, whichever way that you want to look at it, or the stewards will rule when they see it all. And you just go, how tough a weekend can Aston Martin have? Like, this has got to be one of the toughest, most expensive, costly weekends that they've ever had.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. The expense of this, and that this is very expensive. You know, not only have they gone through an engine yesterday, or power unit for Sebastian Vettel, both front corners on both cars, a gearbox for Sebastian Vettel, now another front corner on Lance Stroll's car. The tools have been out the toolbox more time than the cars have been out the garage. I mean, it's been a very strange and difficult weekend for them, and I guess one they're going to want to forget as quickly as possible.
Just as well, Mark, they've got rich parents, eh?
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Well, it's good to see Nicholas Latifi walking away and talking after that incident as well, because it really was a hefty impact for him. But either of the Williams drivers been looking fairly off the pace so far this weekend, so it has been a struggle for the Williams and the Aston Martin team. Kevin Magnussen's also down there in 17th right now. Now, Mark, we're just getting another look at it. So Latifi pulls well out the way, off the road almost, coming out the exit of turn 4. Stroll makes his way through in five, and Latifi drives down the inside of him. There's space there, but it closes quickly.
Do you know what it looked like happened there? It looked like Alex Albon Latifi had been told by his team that a faster car's coming through, i.e. Lance Stroll. Stroll then comes through, but then backs off and looks like he's then on a warm-up lap. So perhaps then Latifi thinks, well, OK, you know, if you're not on a fast lap, I'm going to go through. You've left the door wide open. He puts his foot down. There is massive closing speed, as I say. So to give some credit to Lance Stroll, he wouldn't have known, he wouldn't have had very much warning that Latifi was coming back through. But the door was open. There was a big enough gap, way big enough gap for the Williams to get through. But then at the very last moment, that gap closes, and the front wheels of the Aston Martin hit the rear wheels of the Williams, and that Williams, unfortunately, is destroyed.
And another crash, as we said, for Nicholas Latifi too. A crash during Saudi Arabia, costing Williams an awful lot of time and money right now. And just getting images there, spectacular images, I have to say, of the rear left completely destroying. Then the rear wing flies off the car, in Latifi forced into a spin, hits the front of the car as well. The front wing stays intact just about until it then swings back around, the other way around, into the wall. And Latifi walking away and looking back at the wreckage.
There are not many parts of that car that will be good to go again, unfortunately. So, yeah, real disappointment. What it does do, as we said earlier, we were talking about the two Aston Martins, but we've now lost one Aston Martin for sure, possibly a second one. We've lost one Williams already, which means there are now only 2 spots up for grabs in those bottom 2, which kind of presents opportunities, as I say, for the likes of Mick Schumacher, for Alex Albon, for Kevin Magnussen, who's sitting down in 17th at the moment. We'd expect so much more from him, wouldn't we? So these guys will sense an opportunity, and with one shot left, when we finally get going again, they will have a chance to dig their way out of that. Absolutely.
Well, Magnussen about a tenth or so back from his teammate in 15th at the moment, Mick Schumacher, who is just outside of that Q1 zone. But Zhou, Gasly, Tsunoda, Ricciardo in 11th, all in danger as the track also rubbers in more and more. The track changes constantly, especially as it's been completely resurfaced for the first time since the track was built, really, fully in 1995, before the first race in 1996. So it's not as bumpy as it once was, and it's constantly getting quicker and quicker. So this last couple of minutes could potentially force a couple of the front runners to come out again and do a safety lap, do you think?
Well, I think possibly, because there's no harm in coming out. They can always abort if they really have to. But I think for the likes of Max Verstappen, you heard his engineer telling him earlier on that although your time's safe and it's unlikely you're going to get knocked out here, I mean, he's sitting pretty safe at the top right now, the track time is so valuable to him. They're still trying to figure out and fine-tune that car. So every lap is valuable. It's data, it's a feeling, it's getting experience behind these new cars on this new track surface, as you say. So it's kind of worth being on track at every opportunity at the moment.
Well, it is Red Bull and Ferrari at the top at the moment. Verstappen, Perez 1 and 2, Leclerc, Sainz the top 4, and Alonso in the Alpine 5th, Bottas in the Alfa Romeo 6th. Jenny?
Yeah, just having a look at the different body language of the top drivers. So Max Verstappen still in the car, helmet on, visor just lifted. He's looking at his screens, probably getting a bit of information, maybe watching the crash back again, having his own thoughts on that. But Charles Leclerc out the car, strolling around the garage, having a look at the clouds that are a little bit darker now above Albert Park, and wondering if maybe there's going to be a spot of rain or two. But very different body language from those two. And just a note on McLaren. I know a lot of people were very excited when Lando Norris topped the timesheets in free practice 3. He got a note from his engineer saying, back off now, it's important. It was because he'd run out of fuel, or he was very close to running out of fuel right on the dregs. So that might help to explain a little bit more as well why Norris was able to set such a fast time. So once again, I hate to be the bearer of,
hang on, Jenny.
News,
hang on.
Don't get too excited about the McLarens being on pole.
They were all running on fumes at that stage. It's a qualifying simulation. They're all running on fumes right now. They only have the... No, come on.
Not that much. Come on. Nobody else got told... don't run the car anymore because you're going to run out of fuel and then you're going to, do damage to the car.
No, I know. They cut it a bit too fine. Absolutely. They clearly cut it too fine.
And I know we're talking, mils.
But look, that car has pace in it. We saw a glimpse of it at the end of FP3. They're up there in P7 with Lando at the moment. They're still 7/10 off. So absolutely, when it really matters, the two teams up at the front, the Red Bull and the Ferrari, seem to be able to find a little bit extra. But look, I wouldn't discount the McLaren, at least from the point that they have shown a little bit of extra performance, as we see Sebastian Vettel's car getting a nose and wheels bolted on. Great work from the guys in the Aston Martin garage.
Yeah, Sebastian Vettel, helmet on as well. He's standing there ready to jump in. The session will resume at 16:31 local time, so just under a few minutes to go. So that they could well do it in time for Aston Martin to get out and get at least one lap in for Sebastian Vettel. So they may have lost one car for sure in Lance Stroll, but Vettel doing their utmost to give him a fighting chance just to get some more laps under his belt either way.
He'll get out onto the circuit. I still don't think there's any guarantee he'll make it out of Q1, because not only has he had very little track time anyway, but the moments he's had on track haven't been particularly blistering in terms of pace. So he may well still find himself in a very similar position to the way it looks right now on the timing sheets, which is him right at the very back. But at least he'll get another lap on the board under these kind of conditions, which could be valuable to him.
It's going to be a bit of a 2-minute sprint, isn't it, to the end? And if traffic hasn't been too much of an issue already, it's certainly going to be in these last couple of minutes. The crash between Latifi and Stroll brought about because of a bit of confusion, but we haven't actually seen too many drivers on fast laps being impeded, which we have seen in practice.
No, but we've got now, 2.5 minutes until the session resumes. We've already got all the cars now coming out to queue at the end of the pit lane to get out onto the circuit the moment that light goes green. What you're going to see is everybody now trying to jostle for position and making themselves a space, coming towards 12, 13, turns 12 and 13 and 14 at the end of the lap. And that means that the guys at the back of this queue will be at risk of not making it across the line before the checkered flag comes out. So keep an eye on that. This could get into one of those very messy sessions where people are desperate to find a position, find a space and get past each other. And I hope that it stays safe and under control.
Absolutely. It's going to certainly be one to listen and tune into, Jenny.
Just wondering, has Ricciardo done himself a massive favour to get himself in front of that queue of traffic that's forming at the traffic lights at the end of pit lane?
As long as he gets out in front, because we saw in practice, I think Verstappen overtook one of the Alpha Tauris at the end of the pit lane. He was investigated for it, but there was no further action on that. So if he can get away and keep everyone behind him, then I imagine he'll be laughing. And great for the Australian fans as well to have their Aussie at the front of the queue. But in 11th at the moment, Ricciardo, a few tenths off his teammate Norris, who is in 7th as things currently stand.
And also, I should just say here that we've been talking a lot about tyre warm-up, where the ideal for a lot of people is 2 laps to warm up the tyres. They haven't got that now, so there's got to be a lot of work on warming up tyres, bringing them into the right temperature window, but without introducing that graining phenomenon that can destroy your lap time. So that's going to be really interesting. Some teams struggling more with that than others, notably the Red Bulls of Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, albeit that they seem fairly safe right now at the top of the table.
Yeah, well, either way, we will lose our first few cars from this qualifying session. 1 minute and 30 seconds till we get going, and then it will be pretty much 2 minutes on the clock until we complete Q1. Sebastian Vettel in his car, seatbelts being strapped in, headrest goes on, and the final few tweaks being made to the front rods of his car and the suspension, tape being pulled away. Bit of gaffer tape holding that all together, is it, Mark?
It's such a good feeling, I have to say, as a mechanic, when you're in the garage in moments like this, when you've had an almost what seemed like an insurmountable challenge to get your car ready, and then the stars collide, you get a little break like this red flag, and they've just about managed to pull it out of the bag. And now it's over to the driver to do his thing, which is going to be a real tall order for Sebastian Vettel with what limited experience he's had, not only this weekend but this season. First outing, of course, this time out. So let's see.
Just elbows out, I think, for this one.
Elbows out for Alex Albon, Jenny.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wonder if this is a risk versus reward moment. Do you go out and risk getting damage to the car because there are so many people all going out at the same time? And as you said, it's going to be like an ice rink out there on these tyres to get them to warm up. Or do you just stay put and hope you've done enough already? Sebastian Vettel makes his way out. I have to say, well done, Aston Martin.
Incredible to see Vettel line up at the back of that queue, though. So he's going to have to get a hurry on if he wants to try and get any time on the board before we end this Q1 session. And I think the light has gone green. It has. Ricciardo makes his way out, leading the entire grid by the looks of it. Albon is just behind him. Then come the two Hasses as they make their way on to the circuit into turn one. The pit entry feeds you out a bit late. Pit exit, I should say, feeds you out very late into turn one. Elbows out. Is Albon trying to stop the Haas from getting by him? He is, but it hasn't worked. Albon already on this reconnaissance outlap, fighting with the Haas into turn three. This could be giving us a nice example of what we might see come race day as well. The Haas wins out on that occasion and makes it stick. So Albon already lost a place, and this is qualifying, might I add, not the race.
This is going to get messy. This is going to get messy towards the end of this lap, because we are going to be tight for time. 1 minute and 10 seconds on the clock. There's plenty of time to get round, but is there plenty of time to get round and find a bit of space on the racetrack that you need to have an unimpeded qualifying lap? As you see the guys, the mechanics inside that Aston Martin garage, fist pumping and congratulating themselves for a great job, well done. And as I said, I can testify to how that feels. It is amazing.
And the top seven think they're all safe. So Verstappen, Perez, Leclerc, Sainz, Alonso, Bottas, Norris have not left the pit lane. The rest have. As we see a three-way battle into turn 11 between the Haas, the McLaren and the Williams, trying to find a little bit of track position. They're going to have to sort themselves out as they come into the penultimate corner and give themselves enough gap to not get affected too much by the car in front, but also not hold up the car behind. 24, 23, 22, 21 seconds on the clock for this first Q1 session of qualifying. The drivers at risk are Schumacher, Albon, Magnussen, Latifi, Stroll and Vettel. Latifi and Stroll are out of this qualifying session. They've both crashed out after an incident which saw Latifi's entire rear end destroyed, Stroll having to come to a stop as well. Vettel has made it out in the dying stages of this qualifying session after the engineers working miracles to get that car put together in time. The noise you're hearing is on board with home hero Daniel Ricciardo in the McLaren. It's not looking too good for him in Sector 1. He's down on his time. He is currently, though, in 11th place, about a second off Max Verstappen with a 1:18.5. He's got a little bit of a buffer, but he's going to have to try and find some time, Mark, but he's not finding it.
No, he's not. It's a bit of a struggle this lap. I suspect he might be safe for this session, but moving forward, and any hope of getting into Q3 this afternoon means he needs a lot more pace out of that car at the moment. He hasn't found it. Coming towards the end of the lap now. Let's see what his lap time is. The first two sectors have been okay, but nothing spectacular. It's been tidy. It's not been too scrappy, just not had the pace. Coming out the final corner then, Daniel Ricciardo in front of his home crowd onto the start-finish straight. The lap time's not going to be enough. and it doesn't move him up. He stays in 11th place with a 1:19.9.
He can't improve. Gasly is going quicker though. He crosses the line. Currently in 13th. He displaces Ricciardo, and Ocon moves himself up into 10th. Vettel on his one and only lap in qualifying moves up to 18th ahead of Latifi and just behind Magnussen at the moment. So good to see Sebastian Vettel get a lap time on the board. He crossed the line already with the checkered flag, so he won't get another fast lap time in, but he might well go around just to try and get some more experience under his belt and get that car moving. But the clock is now at 0, and we have lost, by the looks of it, Albon, Magnussen, Vettel, Latifi and Stroll. But really we've lost Albon, Magnussen and Vettel because Latifi crashed out, Stroll 2, Vettel just getting a lap on the board, and Albon only missing out by 30 hundredths of a second.
Yeah, and the big surprise for me there is Magnussen. Not a surprise given the pace we've seen this weekend, but surprising given the pace we've seen in the first 2 races of this season. This circuit hasn't worked for them. The configuration of the car, finding the sweet spot of tyres under these conditions, maybe this track surface or this particular circuit layout just not working for that Haas. And to find Magnussen after the highs of last time out, finding himself eliminated in Q1, not great.
You're hearing Sebastian Vettel as we look back at him in the cockpit.
Okay, thanks guys for getting the car out. Hell of a job there.
Absolutely, really was a hell of a job from the Aston Martin mechanics, who do give themselves a slap on the back as well. Seeing a replay of Vettel into turn 11, really hounding that Aston Martin round. It looks like it's a little bit of a handful on turn in. Just avoids keeping it out of the gravel, not the grass though, as he kicks up a huge amount of dust. And stopped out on track, the other Williams of Alex Albon.
Okay, stop the car, stop the car. Are you sure? Stop with the side and switch off.
Okay, so Alex Albon being told to park his car. I think that's on the run down to turn 12, 13, isn't it? 13 at the end of the lap. Park his car and switch it off. So that could be a simple thing like Lando Norris with running out of fuel, or it could be something more serious. But either way, he's out of this session anyway. They need to get that car back, and they will have until this evening when the car goes back into Parc Ferme and under the supervision of the stewards before they have to tuck it up for bed and get it ready for tomorrow.
Well, that incident between Stroll and Latifi will be investigated after the session. Q2 has a slightly delayed start. Well, it's a dramatic first quarter of qualifying. We've lost 5 cars, but 2 of which were caused in a collision. Nicholas Latifi and Lance Stroll crashing out into each other. That caused a lengthy red flag. Sebastian Vettel with damage in FP3. He did manage to get 1 lap on the board, but we did lose Alex Albon, Kevin Magnussen, Vettel, Latifi and Stroll from this first quarter of qualifying. The Red Bulls and Ferraris occupying the top 4 spots as we head into this next session. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell managed 8th and 9th.
Right, so start of Q2 will be slightly delayed after that red flag earlier on, and we've now got Alex Albon's Williams being pushed off the edge of the racetrack after stopping at the end of that session. Jenny?
Yeah, just having a chat with Mercedes and asking kind of what their plan was, because at the end of that session they did send Hamilton and Russell out, and everybody above them just stayed in the pits. They didn't make it around in time to actually do a lap, so they took the checkered flag after 1, but they were out on the used soft tyre, and Mercedes said actually that was their plan. They wanted to go out on the used tyre just to do an extra little bit of learning. They knew they wouldn't make the lap, and given how long the others waited at the end of the pit lane, it was also very likely that they were safe, which does make sense because they've waited so long out there that they didn't have any warmth left in their tyres. So yeah, that would explain why they went out, but I think it's going to be game on for Q2. Some really impressive looking times, but some very nervy cars out there.
Nervy cars. I'm feeling a bit nervous. That's got me riled up for the rest of this qualifying session, I have to say, as Alex Albon helps the marshals wheel that Williams back into the pit lane. Q2 has been delayed as a result, so I presume as soon as they get that car into a safe position, we will get the signal from the race control to get going again. And just making it through, Zhou Guanyu and Mick Schumacher. Mick Schumacher out-qualifying Kevin Magnussen, which he hasn't done in the first 2 rounds. Of course, he looks set for a Q3 appearance in Saudi Arabia with that huge shunt in Q2 depriving him of that. Although he won't be too pleased that he's only just escaped in 15th. But actually, that's a promising sign for Schumacher, isn't it?
Yeah, as a driver, all you can really gauge yourself against is your teammate. We often say that, don't we? And Kevin Magnussen, although new to this team in this era of the sport, he's obviously got a lot more experience in Formula One than Mick Schumacher. So a decent gauge. We know what Magnussen's capable of. In fact, we've seen it in very recent times, last time out in Saudi Arabia. So Mick Schumacher finding his way in front of him is a real positive that I'm sure he'll take from that.
Confirmation Q2 will start in about 4 minutes time. Get in touch if you fancy. It's the hashtag BBC F1. Jackie has said she's opposite the Haas F1 pit garage and there are raindrops on her iPad screen while she's looking at the timing. I can't see them on the camera lenses on our end. The air temperature 23.2 degrees, track temperature 28.8 I should say.
Love that.
Some grey clouds in the sky, Jenny.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some very dark grey clouds actually just over the lake to the right-hand side of the track, and there are a few drops and drips just coming down in the pit lane. I don't think it'll worry things too much because track temperature is pretty high, so it'll just kind of evaporate as soon as it touches. But it's not what the drivers need at this point. We've already seen this is a very fast, tricky track to get to grips with. We've seen crashes in almost every session, crashes in Q1. I think the drivers will just want a nice, easy session of it, maybe. Although, what about Hamilton? Hamilton would love a bit of rain, wouldn't he? That would give him at least a chance to do something in that Mercedes.
Exactly. You know, and from a fan's perspective, mixing it up like that is great, isn't it? We want to see these extra challenges being thrown at these guys. So I wouldn't be averse to a little bit of rain coming. So Jackie, our meteorologist over in the grandstand opposite the Haas garage, let us know if it gets any heavier. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. Hashtag BBC F1 if you want to get involved. Now, 2 minutes and 30 seconds until Q2 starts. I want to bring in the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson. Andrew, what have you made from this first qualifying session in Australia in 3 years?
Well, it's been kind of crazy, hasn't it? It's, first of all, hats off to the Aston Martin mechanics. Obviously, they wouldn't have made it had that red flag not happened. But they did make it. And, solid effort from Sebastian Vettel, who really hadn't had a lap all weekend. But still, things are difficult for them. At the front of the field, the Red Bulls had a big advantage over the Ferraris, bigger than we've seen all season so far. So Verstappen's more than just over 3/10 quicker than Charles Leclerc. Obviously it's early days, first session of qualifying. We can't read too much into it, but the Red Bull look very good out on track. The Ferrari has got that porpoising stroke bouncing problem. So are we seeing the first signs of what Charles Leclerc predicted before they'd even turned a wheel this weekend coming true, that the Red Bull would have an advantage in Australia?
Well, as we head into Q2, we'll get a more and more understanding of that. A minute and 20 to go. And we've had a great question come in that actually both of you could answer this if you like. Mark Smith, hashtag BBC F1, on Aston Martin. If Aston Martin can only field one car tomorrow, who gets to drive it?
Well, it's the guy that qualified it. It's Sebastian Vettel. Lance Stroll hasn't qualified, so it's not the car that qualifies, it's the driver. So it will be Sebastian Vettel, even though the other guy is the owner's son.
Well, even though. Right, thank you, Mark. Hashtag BBC F1. Keep them coming in as well. 43 seconds to go until we get qualifying underway. Q2, I should say, underway. We have lost, if you're just joining us, Alex Albon, Kevin Magnussen, Sebastian Vettel, Nicholas Latifi and Lance Stroll in Q1. Of course, Albon will get a 3-place grid penalty, so that will drop him back behind Latifi, but Latifi and Stroll coming together in a huge incident in Q1, so it will be a race against time to see if they are able to start tomorrow. Sebastian Vettel, his Aston Martin mechanics, doing a brilliant job in getting that car together after a shunt in FP3. It's looking likely he will be able to start, and he did get a lap time in to slot just behind Magnussen. But the big surprise of that one, as we've said, is Kevin Magnussen falling out of Q1, beaten by Mick Schumacher. But we are ready to go now for Q2. The green light is on at the end of the pit lane, and it's Max Verstappen who heads out first. Hamilton behind him, Russell, then Schumacher, as we get this next 14 minutes and 45, 44, 43, 42 seconds of Q2 underway.
Yeah, so this is an even bigger test then. Fewer cars out on the circuits, but even more meaning to this. It's the top 10, of course, that'll go through to the final Q3 shootout, which will then decide the positions, final top 10 positions for the grid. Max Verstappen out. We've seen a few little issues with tyre warm-up from the Red Bull, so perhaps he's out early just to manage that and find the best way of managing that. Is it one warm-up lap? Is it two warm-up laps before he really goes for an all-out push lap with this car? We will only time will tell, but he's out on circuit first. He's got the clear track in front of him. Let's see what he can do.
Bottas and Zhou not in too much of a hurry to get out of the pit lane. The two Alfa Romeo cars waiting a little bit longer. Of course, the fight for track position and space will be a little easier now because we've lost 5 cars from this next session, but still they'll be wanting every inch they can get. Lewis Hamilton making his way around. He's already gone one better than he did in Saudi Arabia. He hasn't been knocked out of Q1. Warming up the tyres, the Mercedes team saying they've been really struggling with generating heat into these tyres. In fact, it's probably one of the biggest issues that they've had with this car, on top of the porpoising and on top of everything else. He gets ready to start the first flyer, but across the line Max Verstappen starts his first flyer. He's leading the charge at the moment into turn 1. Looks nice and smooth through the left-hander of 2, down the first of the straights with DRS, after the main straight I should say, into the braking zone of turn 3. They've winded this one to the right by a few meters. Gravel to your left. We've seen a lot of cars through there at the moment. Nice and tidy so far from Max Verstappen, but we've seen this from Verstappen. He actually pushes a lot in the practice sessions. He uses them for what they're for. We saw him spinning out in practice, of course, and then that just gets him what he needs come qualifying.
Very true, yeah. Runs nice and wide over the curves, but not too far. Keeping decent speed. First sector went purple. Of course, that's the first one of this session, so of course it's purple. But a decent, tidy lap for Max Verstappen so far. Comes through the middle sector. Again, nice and tidy. Through 9, is that 9 and 10? Out towards... no, sorry, he was coming down towards turn 9, 10 now, isn't he?
That's through, yeah, he's just been through turn 9 and 10, so that's 11, out through 11. Tell you what, his teammate is, was quicker.
He was.
Briefly in sector 1, he's now been displaced. Carlos Sainz quickest in the first sector at the moment. Leclerc on a hot lap as well. Yellow flag in sector 3, not sure what that's about just yet. Verstappen comes out of the final corner. He's gone fastest in the middle sector at the moment, but he's the first lap time on the board at 1:18.6, and now we'll get an idea. What can Perez, Leclerc and Sainz do? Sainz fastest of them all at the moment in sector 1, personal bests for all of them in sector 1, and coming through sector 3 Hamilton goes with a 1:20.19.4, displaced by Perez, a 1:18.9 in second, and now the two Ferraris come through the final corner.
So either Hamilton's had a major incident or he's taking 2 warm-up laps, because he was 10 seconds off on his first timed lap, so perhaps he going for 2 warm-up laps before a push lap. But at the moment it's Verstappen from Perez, from Leclerc, nothing between Leclerc and Perez, and then Sainz following up in 4th, just a couple of tenths back. So almost nothing between the Ferraris and the Red Bulls, which is kind of what we've seen in the first 2 races. It looks to be the same again here, which bodes for a really good, exciting qualifying session, potentially a really good race tomorrow too.
Really exciting at the moment. Norris just slots into 4th. Alonso crossing the line as well. He's gone fastest in the middle sector. He puts it up into second, a 1:18.8, a couple of tenths behind Max Verstappen. Lewis Hamilton, that's the sound you're hearing on board with the Mercedes driver. Overall best in the first sector, personal best in the middle sector, through turn 11, manages to keep it neat and tidy, his head bumping up and down all the way through the next corner as well, into the penultimate, turn 13, heavy on the brakes, chucks it into the left, keeps it stable, a little bit of a twitch on the steering wheel, out on the final corner, onto the main straight, and down the start-finish straight, across the line. What can Lewis Hamilton achieve? It's 8th, it's 6 tenths off, it's a 1:19.2 for Lewis Hamilton.
Really struggling in that final sector, Lewis Hamilton, for pace. The car looked a little bit twitchy, not too bad, but losing a huge chunk of time throughout the end of the middle sector and then the final sector too. A lot of bouncing still on that Mercedes, but they just have no answer for the likes of Ferrari and the Red Bulls up front. But strong lap from Lando Norris up in P5 at the moment. His teammate Daniel Ricciardo right behind him in P6. So that's a real promising start to the qualifying 2 session for the McLarens, as George Russell runs very wide and has to do a big burnout spin turn to get himself back on track. So still real struggles for the Mercedes team all the way through in terms of handling and balance and just keeping that car on the racetrack. The moment they push to try and generate lap time, the car steps over that ragged edge and it becomes a real handful to keep control of.
Yeah, that was Russell in turn 11 going wide and spinning back onto the track. Jenny?
Yeah, worth noting, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc and the Ferraris were running on the used soft tyre. So those around them were on the new tyre. Perez, Alonso and Verstappen all on new tyres.
Thanks, Jenny. So Perez on new tyres, 3.5 tenths off at the moment. He's just gone personal best in the middle sector. He's currently going a little bit faster than his teammate Max Verstappen, who is just coming out of the final corner now. DRS Open brings it across the line. Currently a 1:18.6. What can he improve to? If he can improve, he can't improve. Loses a lot of time in that final sector as well. Verstappen leads Alonso, leads Perez in third. That is the sound you can hear of the Mexican driver who achieved his first pole position last time out in Saudi Arabia and goes top of this Q2 session at the moment, over 2.5 tenths clear of his teammate. Russell slots up into 6 at the moment, at risk of being knocked out. It's Ocon, Bottas, Schumacher and Tsunoda and Zhou who have yet to set a lap time.
That was a stonking lap from Perez, and I'll tell you what seems to be the big difference between the 2 Red Bulls is Max Verstappen has at times this weekend put in a faster lap time, but he's literally hanging on the ragged edge of that car. Perez seems much more under control and now able to deliver a lap time that's comparable and even quicker than his teammate. Currently just over 2.5 tenths quicker than his Red Bull teammate Sergio Perez. So a real strong start to the session for the 2 Red Bulls.
And we've had a question come in from Hamish, who's just asked, what do we mean when we refer to purple and green sectors?
It's a very good point, Hamish. So on our timing screens, on the official Formula 1 timing screens, the circuit's split up into 3 main sectors, and every time a driver sets a lap time, let's just hear Lewis.
Traffic with the Red Bull.
Copy, complete the lap.
I had a problem with the Red Bull was in the way.
So that was Lewis Hamilton just complaining about a Red Bull getting in his way there. Yeah, Hamish, the lap time is split up into 3. Let's hear Verstappen's response.
Hey, was he on the lap?
Hamilton was on the lap, yeah.
Okay, so the bleep machine getting a workout there from Max Verstappen. He didn't know that Lewis was coming through on a hot lap, so that was the confusion and perhaps why he got in his way. But yes, that timing, Hamish, the timing is broken up into 3 sectors of the lap. If timing lights up purple, that means they are the fastest of anyone during that session. So that sector was the fastest anyone's done. If it's green, then it was the fastest that they've done, a personal best. And if it's yellow, it was none of those things.
Excellently explained. Mark Priestley, former chief F1 mechanic for the McLaren Formula 1 team, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. We've also got the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson, and Jenny Gao with us as well. 6 minutes and 30 seconds on the clock left of this Q2 session. Perez, Vettel currently lead. Lando Norris is in 5th. Jenny?
Yeah, he is. He's just been talking to his team, saying, so am I doing 2 cool-down laps or 1? They were like, no, you're doing 1 cool-down lap. So Lando Norris still out there circulating, and the Ferrari's just switching onto a new tyre, a new soft tyre, to see what they can do.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. And, well, at the moment, McLaren looking okay to try and get through to Q3, and they have yet to reach Q3 this year, which is an unbelievable stat. So well, both cars have yet to reach Q3, so they're hoping to try and break that duct at the moment. The 2 Alfa Romeos are just looking at, Bottas has set a time in 12. Zhou Guanyu and Tsunoda haven't set lap times yet, so they're waiting. Are they waiting to the very end just to do perhaps 1 or 2 laps?
Yeah, it's interesting strategy there. I don't know the answer
That's
to that.
That's normally
one.
what you'd see in Q3, isn't
exactly, yeah. But it's not like we're sort of waiting for the circuit to evolve particularly. It will evolve, and it is evolving all weekend, of course. The more laps that go through it, the more rubber that goes down, so potentially it gets quicker. But I would have thought the bigger priority was to get laps on the board, because with every single one, particularly on a circuit like this that's not used very often, you start to learn more and more. So interesting strategy. Maybe they've got an issue somewhere that we don't know about.
Well, they're on outlaps at the moment. We've just seen pop up on our timing screens. 5 minutes to go of this second qualifying session. It's the battle to try and get into the top 10. This Q2 session sets the places for 11th to 15th on the grid. Occupying those positions at the moment are Esteban Ocon and the Alpine. Alfa Romeo is in 12th with Valtteri Bottas. Then it's Mick Schumacher in the Haas 13th. Yuki Tsunoda is 14th, and Zhou Guanyu currently occupying 15th spot. Ferrari and Carlos Sainz start another flying lap at the moment. Sainz is currently down in 8th position, so he's not feeling safe. He wants to try and get a faster lap time on the board as well. Leclerc, his teammate, is up in 4th.
Well, this is the first new tyre runs for the Ferrari, so perhaps this is where we really get to see their pace and whether they can actually match that Red Bull of Sergio Perez currently leading and Max Verstappen currently topping the timesheets. Incident involving Sergio Perez. I didn't see who else going to be investigated after the session.
Yeah, I think that's due to not slowing down sufficiently when Russell went off track. So that's been noted.
So that's one to keep an eye on post-session. We'll keep you across that if we get any information come through, but it's going to be investigated afterwards. So perhaps keep an eye on BBC Sports for any updates.
Absolutely. DRS open, then closed under braking for Carlos Sainz through turn 11. Takes a hefty amount of curb, not too much, otherwise you're into the gravel, and into 13 he goes. He's lost a bit of time in the middle sector. Personal best in the first sector, comes round the final corner. How much can he get out of that Ferrari this time around? Crosses the line, goes third fastest, a 1:18.7, so he's behind the Red Bulls of Verstappen and Perez. Yuki Tsunoda, Pierre Gasly and Valtteri Bottas all on hot laps, as well as Zhou Guanyu. We're going to see the AlphaTauri come across first in Gasly, who is just ahead of Valtteri Bottas. What can Gasly do? I think he stays in 10th. Bottas stays in 12th. Zhou Guanyu stays in 15th at the moment. No, he does move up to 13th. Zhou Guanyu up into 13th. That knocks Schumacher down to 14th. Tsunoda in 15th. Leclerc's on a fast lap. He's lost a bit of time in the middle sector. Crosses the line, goes second, splits the Red Bulls.
Well, he does split the Red Bulls, but interestingly, he hasn't got anything to match Sergio Perez's time of a 1:18.3. 2.5 tenths off, and that's not what we've seen so far this weekend from the Ferraris. We've seen a real, almost hundredths in it over most of the weekend. So that's interesting. Of course, this isn't the one that matters in terms of setting the grid for tomorrow, certainly not for the top 10 at least. So that safely gets him through to Q3, and that is the one that's really going to count for those Ferraris and Red Bulls.
Certainly is. Esteban Ocon in 11th as Hamilton just goes 9th ahead of Gasly in 10th. Ocon really hasn't looked to... as Hamilton just starts the flying lap, I should say. He's currently in 9th, but Ocon hasn't looked like he's had the pace of his teammate Alonso. He's up in 5th right now, all weekend long.
Yeah, that's right. There are some decent differences between a couple of drivers. Hamilton sitting currently behind Russell in terms of that teammate battle. Ocon, significantly behind his teammate Alonso as well. Lewis has got to pull something out the bag here, because... has he backed off? He has backed off, with 1:30 to go. So he'll get one more lap, but he's currently sitting 9th. Is anyone else out on circuit at the moment behind him? Is he safe? Well, Esteban Ocon on an out lap at the moment. So Hamilton just on the cusp, sitting 9th. Of course, if he drops outside the top 10, that will be it for his qualifying afternoon. So let's keep an eye on what he does.
Hashtag BBC F1. Ben Ashworth said, I think Hamilton will be having soup for dinner tonight, given his teeth will have shaken out with all the bouncing the Mercedes goes through on the straights, referring to the porpoising there. So the Mercedes struggling yet again, but this time Hamilton through at the moment into Q3, 50 seconds on the clock till we find out who will make it through to the top 10. Esteban Ocon's going to have another go at it. Perez has just gotten up into the top with a 1:18.3 ahead of Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz and Alonso. The top 5 hasn't just got up there, he's been there, but he's in the pits now, I should say. A 1:18.3. Ocon trying again to go faster to get out of that bottom zone. Gasly is the driver at risk. The two Frenchmen fighting over Q3 right now, but neither going particularly fast. Ocon, though, making up time in the middle sector.
Yeah, you got to say Lewis Hamilton's at risk here. I think he's probably on a cool-down lap ahead of one final push lap. We've got 10 seconds left on the clock, so can Hamilton get round? Is he going to get round? I don't think he is, no. So Hamilton's day probably over. In 9th place with Ocon on a fairly decent lap. That could push Ocon inside the top 10. Is it going to be better than Lewis Hamilton, though? Is Hamilton going to be at risk of dropping out of Q2?
The checkered flag flies. What can Esteban Ocon do? He does get up into the top 10 in 8th. Hamilton now the driver at risk. He moves down to 10th. Ricciardo's only just in front of him on 9th. Hamilton won't get another lap in. Gasly also running to the line now. The Frenchman, the race winner as well, can't improve his lap time. He stays behind Hamilton in 11th. Ricciardo is also on a flyer, as is Tsunoda as well, who's down in 15th right now. What can Daniel Ricciardo do? He gets in front of Ocon and solidifies 8th position for Ricciardo. Tsunoda still waiting for the Japanese AlphaTauri driver to come across the line. You ride on board with him now into 13th position, just behind Bottas and just in front of Zhou Guanyu. Hamilton does set another lap time and he does get in to the top 10 with 8th position. So that knocks Gasly down. Gasly stays there in behind Ocon in 10th. And Mick Schumacher comes into the pits. So that is Q2 done, and we have lost Pierre Gasly, Valtteri Bottas, which brings an end to something over 100 consecutive Q3 appearances. So unfortunately for Bottas, he won't be able to add to that tally. Tsunoda is 13th, Zhou Guanyu is 14th, Mick Schumacher down in 15th.
Yeah, twitchy moment for Lewis Hamilton there towards the end, and that's a sign of the times, isn't it? Desperately trying to scrape through into Q3, which he does, but puts himself behind his teammate. So once again in that session, Russell just about outperforming Lewis. That's been a sign of 2022 so far. Not much in it, less than a few hundreds really, but it was all about the last couple of laps of that session. We saw a replay there of Yuki Tsunoda on his final lap of the session, getting all crossed up with loads of understeer and ending himself up into the gravel trap, and that was why we didn't see an improvement from him, and out of qualifying he goes.
Both AlphaTauris failing to get through to Q3. Lewis Hamilton will be pleased with that progress as well, although behind his teammate Russell, who ended up in 7th, but not much between them. A 1:19.0 for Russell and a 1:19.1 for Lewis Hamilton. Ricciardo through to Q3.
Yeah, prepare another helmet with the darkest visor you have.
Copy.
The darkest visor you have. The sun is horrible. Actually, it's dangerous. Cannot see anything.
Okay, copy.
Charles Leclerc there, complaining about the sun, so wanting a darker visor for this final qualifying 3 session as well. As we ride on board with Russell, getting a replay there, navigating the traffic. He's come across nearly every single car on his way to the penultimate corner and just backs off. I think he came across about 7 or 8 cars there.
Yeah, that was tricky, wasn't it?
Very tricky. Q3 will start in 5:07 local time, so in about 5 minutes time before we get Q3 underway. Perez, Sainz, Leclerc, Verstappen and Alonso were the top 5 from that session. So Alonso carrying through the good form of Alpine, and Ocon managing to squeeze in to Q3 makes it an Alpine double appearance for them. 2 McLarens, 2 Mercedes, 2 Red Bulls, 2 Ferraris as well. So it's 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 at the moment in Q3.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, Q2 has just ended. It was a dramatic Q1. Two crashes, one crash involving two cars. Latifi and Stroll with a huge crash. They were both out on the spot. Q2 has just ended though, and we have lost Pierre Gasly, Valtteri Bottas, Yuki Tsunoda, Zhou Guanyu and Mick Schumacher. That has set the grid spots from 11th to 15th. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell have both made it through into Q3. Last time out, Lewis Hamilton was knocked out in 16th, so they're buoyed by that progress there. But at the moment, it is still looking like Red Bull versus Ferrari in the battle for pole.
Oh, just looking at Sergio Perez, we know that he's going to have to go to see the stewards after the session, or that at least he doesn't have to go and see them. It's just that the incident is going to be investigated after the session with the double waved yellows and the fact that he did not slow when George Russell went off track. Hopefully that doesn't rain on his parade, because last time out he said, oh, that was, a lap in 1,000. I think he's done it again. I think the lap that he did to put in the fastest time was absolutely spectacular. And he's only used 2 tyres to do this whole lot. So he has loads of tyres, he's got loads of time, and hopefully he's got a bit of luck, which means that he won't get penalised for not slowing under the yellows. And we'll see what happens.
Please have the helmet ready for the visor. Sun's in my eyes here. Roger.
Lewis Hamilton adding on to what Charles Leclerc said a few moments ago. All the drivers wanting to get a darker visor because the sun is shining.
Mate, I can't see with the sun. It's unbelievable. I'm completely blinded.
Verstappen joining that fight as well. So I think as the day draws on, it's nearly 5 o'clock their local time, I think. So the sun's setting, of course, it gets lower and lower and straight into the eye line of these drivers, because the grey clouds that we saw earlier, potentially a few drops of rain in the air, look like to have dissipated a little bit.
Yeah, and it's a real issue. I mean, it's just like when you're driving down the motorway with a sunset, or if you're up early enough for a sunrise, the sun does blind you, and you're in this compact scenario of a Formula One car where, even more so than in your road car, you've got complete field of vision in front of you with an open visor of 180 degrees almost vision in front of you. So the sun really can be a problem when you're desperately trying to pick out the apexes and the braking zones and these points around a racetrack. So putting a darker visor on, and that's all it'll take, is a change of visor on a helmet that's pre-prepared for them, will make all the difference.
Who did you predict for pole earlier?
I said Leclerc. I'm now going to change my mind. No, I'm not. Do you know what? I'm not. I think it's. I think Perez is definitely looking strongest. As I said, he's generated an amazing lap time, but he's done it whilst looking under control, and that's the thing that stood out for me over and above his teammate Verstappen. I think Leclerc and Sainz in the Ferrari, there's not a lot in it. They have stepped up the Red Bulls during that last session when it really mattered. So they are the favourites, I guess, at this point. But it's close enough that anything could still happen.
And Perez has certainly stepped up his qualifying game compared to last year as well. He's been a lot closer, a lot more often, and ahead of Verstappen so far this season. So that sort of number 1 and number 2 driver label, although Verstappen very much the lead driver in that team coming through the Red Bull programme, Perez may well cause a bit of a spanner in those works.
Well, and what can Fernando Alonso do now at this sharp end of qualifying? He finds himself up at the dizzy heights of P5. Can he mix it? Can he get in amongst the Ferraris and the Red Bulls? Can he really offer something that could put a cat amongst the pigeons? We've seen signs of that. It's been sporadic throughout the weekend. It's not been necessarily consistent all the way through, but there are glimmers of hope, there are glimmers of performance in that car that I'd say put them right up there with the best of them.
Fernando Alonso, of course, appearing in Melbourne 21 years after making his debut here as a 19-year-old for Minardi back in 2001, as we get ready for Q3. So fighting it out for pole and those top 10 positions on the grid are Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, Verstappen, Alonso, Norris, Russell, Ricciardo, Ocon and Perez, who make their way out. It is 2 Red Bulls, 2 Ferraris, 2 Mercedes and 2 Alpine and 2 McLaren, all fighting it out for that top 10. So great to see. Both drivers getting up there for the teams. They'll certainly be happy with that. Gives them a 50-50 shot at trying to get the best qualifying session they can. It's Perez leading the charge, though. He's the first driver out there, so he's got the best track position, but with only 10 cars out on track compared to Q2 and Q1, jinx it if I dare, but hopefully traffic won't be too much of an issue in Q3.
Yeah, it shouldn't be quite the same challenge in that regard, but they will all still want the best place on the racetrack. They will be still trying to create themselves enough space to get the cleanest lap they can. I mean, this is where it really matters. This is where the pressure ramps up to the highest point we've seen of the weekend so far. Already this weekend, we've seen drivers dancing on the limit and quite often over the limit. And if they want to get the absolute maximum out of these cars, that's where they need to be in this moment for the next 10 minutes of this qualifying 3 session. So who's going to make it? Who's going to tip themselves over the edge, potentially causing not only themselves problems, but problems for everyone else as the yellow flags, potentially even stoppages happen. But here we go. It's the first Red Bull of Max Verstappen crossing the line first to start his first flying lap. Let's see what we can do.
10 minutes or so on the clock of this Q3 session. Hashtag BBCF1 if you want to get involved. Jenny.
Yeah, only the top 4 out there right now have a new set of soft tyres bolted on. Everybody else on used tyres.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay, so it looks like Alonso might be playing the waiting game as well and going out towards the end of this session. He's still in the pits, the only of the top 10 to do so. Ocon is out there as teammates, so Alpine splitting their qualifying strategy. Verstappen and Perez going hammer and tongs at the moment. Verstappen winning out in Sector 1 at the moment. He's faster than Sergio Perez, but also with wait times from the 2 Ferraris, but it has seemed like the Red Bulls might have a slight edge this time around.
Yeah, good start to the lap. Crashed over the curbs, though, in the middle part of the lap as he comes into turn 11. The deep braking zone, then a tight right-hander reprofiled for this year through turn 12 and now to the penultimate corner, turn 13. A big lock-up on the inside left front tyre. That's going to hamper him big as he comes through the final corner onto the start-finish straight. That will accost him, and he won't be happy with that, but he will have more opportunity to go again. It's a 1:18.39 for Verstappen. It's a decent lap time, but there's clearly a lot more in that car.
Sergio Perez coming across the line as well. His Red Bull teammate, what can he do? He finds more time in that final sector and goes a 1:18.398, a thousandth in it between the 2 Red Bull cars.
As Charles Leclerc backs out of his flying lap. So I think he's just either had an issue or making himself some more space, but he wasn't happy, so he'll go again. Ricciardo on a flyer. Sparks flying from the underneath of that orange McLaren as he comes through the final corner, turn 14, onto the start-finish straight. Can he give something to keep the crowd cheering, to keep the people in his own garage happy? After a difficult weekend, he goes third with a 1:19.0. It's not going to be quick enough to mix it at the very front, but a steady lap, I'd say, early on for Daniel Ricciardo.
As the Aussie fans applaud their man for going third. He is ahead of Ocon, though. Hamilton's got a lap time on the board, but it's not too competitive. That was a warm-up lap, so he's going fully for it this time around. You're riding on board with Lewis Hamilton on the run down to the new turn 9 and 10. The quick left-hander into the right-hand. A little bit of traffic ahead. You can hear the bumping of the porpoising, Hamilton's helmet bobbing up and down, but he makes it through turn 9 and 10. A little bit squirrely on the steering wheel, though.
Yeah, down towards turn 11 he goes. Hard on the brakes, gets it turned in, runs out a little bit wide on the curb, but not too much. It's reasonably tidy, but is it quick? It's this sector where they've been struggling most, I think, to generate the lap time. Through turn 13, through turn 14, back onto the start-finish straight he goes, dancing on the edge of that throttle, on the edge of grip. What's the Mercedes got as he crosses the line? It's nearly 9/10 off Sergio Perez in pole. That's a long way off, really, almost a second for Lewis Hamilton. That's not what he's been used to over the past few years. What has Charles Leclerc got as he comes out the final corner? The first... Oh, it's a big crash. It's the Alpine of Fernando Alonso in the wall. That's going to bring out the red flags, I'm almost certain. There it is, red flag, 7 minutes on the clock, which will stop at this point. Leclerc just gets his lap time in. It's a 1:18.2, blistering lap from the Ferrari, which puts him top of the timesheets right now, ahead of the 2 Red Bulls. But that's Fernando Alonso. We said about a promising start he had to the weekend, but he's now in the wall and out of this session.
And that was not part of El Plan for Fernando Alonso. He is out, no lap time on the board. He was one of the later cars to leave the pits. And that is hugely frustrating. He has been looked set for at least a top 6 position in qualifying. Let's see how it happened into turn 11. Doesn't get it turned in, loses the back end, into the gravel, into the wall, and the front left is gone.
I lost the hydraulics, and I could not change gear.
Well, we talked about reliability, didn't we, being an issue for Alpine, and if that's the case, if that's what's happened, let's not be too quick to blame Fernando. It's the same place in the circuit and a very similar accident to the one that Lance Stroll had earlier on, but if that could be a reliability issue, that's an even bigger concern perhaps for the Alpine team.
And they'll be hugely worried now about Esteban Ocon's car. If it is a reliability issue, the same thing could happen to the sister car. Ocon has got a lap time and he's in 5th, but Alonso is out of the car, walking away. He will take no part longer in this qualifying session at the moment. He did have the fastest middle sector up until that point. Verstappen is fastest in the first sector. Leclerc is fastest in the 3rd sector. So he was really in the hunt, and he does wander back to his car to try and find a way off the circuit, I think. But work to do overnight then for the Alpine team to get that car ready for the race tomorrow. Hopefully there won't be any penalties incurred. Of course, there are penalties awaiting Fernando Alonso for his engine changes that he's already had to use up in the start of this season, as all the cars come back in to the pits at the moment. So 6 minutes 58 stopped on the clock. Leclerc is fastest ahead of Perez, Verstappen, Ricciardo. Ocon is 5th. Then it's Norris, Hamilton, Sainz, Russell in 9th, and Alonso crashing out occupies 10th. Charles Leclerc just setting that lap time in the nick of time before the red flag came out, so he does get that 1:18.239, just over a 10th and a half clear of the 2 Red Bulls. Ricciardo in 4th.
It's a solid lap from Charles Leclerc. We haven't yet seen a solid lap from Carlos Sainz. That's the sound that you can hear is Carlos Sainz on the radio.
Box.
Just as I was crossing the line.
Yeah, exactly. Lap time not there.
So there you go. That's why we didn't see the lap time, because the red flag came out just before he crossed the start-finish line to put that time on the board. But I'll tell you what we are seeing is an incredibly close fight between the Red Bulls and the Ferraris. And I love to see this. We've got Charles Leclerc with a great time there of a 1:18.2 on the top of the timesheets. But Sergio Perez just a 10th and a half behind him. Max Verstappen very close as well. And I expect to see Carlos Sainz join that fight as we get the session back underway as well. This is exactly what we want in Formula One, isn't it? Not just 2 drivers going head-to-head, but 2 teams and all 4 drivers really with nothing between them.
It's brilliant, isn't it? And that is what we wanted from these regulation changes at the very least. We'd like to have more teams join them, but right now it is looking tight for the battle for pole. Jenny.
Incredibly tight, isn't it? And timing is everything. And Charles Leclerc just getting the rub of the green, managing to get his time set. And on the other side of the garage, Carlos Sainz just behind the line when the red flag came out. So, of course, his time doesn't count for anything. So he's down in 8th. So I feel like the pressure will be on Sainz now to come out there and really try and do something and perform. There's just under 7 minutes left on the clock for this red flag stoppage. And a lot of new tyres will get bolted on the cars. A lot of people were running their used tyres for that session. But this is going to be fascinating to see which of these 4 exceptional drivers in exceptional cars can come out here and just turn it on. Because that's what they're going to have to do, isn't it? The run plan is going to have to alter now because of this red flag.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, really fascinating. They've got longer than they had after the red flag in the earlier session. So in that occasion, earlier on today, we had only just 1 flying lap for each of the drivers. We've got almost 7 minutes on the clock. That'll give them enough time to prepare the tyres in the way they want, get the warm-up right in the way that suits them and their car, perhaps get a couple of flying laps in even. So much more opportunity for drivers still to figure out the best way around this racetrack. But there is not a lot between the ultimate inherent pace of those 2 front-running cars, the Red Bull. I've been used to saying Mercedes for too many years, haven't I? Mercedes, the Red Bull and the Ferrari. Nothing between them.
That was Mark Priestley The voice of Mark Priestley, former chief mechanic for the McLaren F1 team, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin, Jenny Gow here too, as we hear the onboards of Fernando Alonso and get another look at that crash. So on the run down to turn 11, having just set the fastest middle sector, and you can hear the engine just cuts out.
It actually did sound like it was. He said he lost hydraulics, but of course that is perhaps a function of the engine stalling itself. So it could well be that he lost all power, or certainly lost all performance from the power unit, and that, as a result, loses the hydraulics, which then means he can't change gear and he's a sitting duck. And how frustrating was that for Carlos Sainz? Just about to set a lap time, which would have put him up into the mix for the front three, and the red flags came out meters before he crossed the line.
Well, it's a little bit about luck in this game, isn't it? You make your own luck, but sometimes that one just getting away from Sainz, but it working out for his teammate Charles Leclerc, who is currently on top. Well, all the drivers just sitting in their cars, in their garages, are waiting for the end of this red flag period while they clear up Fernando Alonso's car. Such a shame for Fernando Alonso as well, because as well as looking competitive, this was his first time reaching Q3 in Australia since 2014 with Ferrari. So it's been a long time, a long awaited return to Q3 in Melbourne for Fernando Alonso, ending in tears. But Otmar Zafnauer, the team principal for Alpine, moving across from Aston Martin, still with a smile and a nod to the camera. So still very happy with the inherent pace of that Alpine, with Ocon up in fifth. The session will restart at 5:25 local time, so just over 5 minutes or so.
The one positive that the Alpine team and Fernando will take was that he was on a blistering lap. I mean, of course, there's the argument that if you're going too quickly, that's what happens. You end up in the wall. But I think it looks more like a technical failure than anything Fernando did wrong there. But his lap time was looking good. I mean, quickest of anybody in the middle sector. So some serious and genuine performance in that Alpine, particularly in the hands of Fernando Alonso.
Just been having a look at the replays actually and going on board with Fernando Alonso. He's stuck in fourth and just could not get the car to downshift because he wanted to get third for turn 11 and it just wouldn't go. So there clearly is an issue with the car. It's not just Fernando Alonso having crashed. And I think this does raise, I suppose, a wider question of the form that Alpine seem to have, which is good, versus the reliability issues that they seem to have, which is definitely bad. And you can come out with as good a car as you want, but it's got to be able to stay on track. And we've seen now several times that Alpine is just lacking that, I suppose, that top level performance when it comes to reliability. And that's going to have to be a worry for the team. And obviously Otmar Zafnauer came in this winter. He's going to have to do something quite quickly to work out why they're having these reliability issues, what's going on and how they can get rid of them.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Jenny. And I guess the real key to all of that is, are these reliability issues all connected to each other? Have they got one serious problem that's all linked, that's causing similar issues at each weekend? Or is it a number of random and unconnected issues, which would be perhaps an even bigger worry for the team? If it's one thing and they can find a solution, you cure your problem in one fell swoop. If it's not, if it's just lots of reliability problems, that's an even wider problem for the team.
Work to do then for the Alpine cars, and we've mentioned Sainz has a good lap time in him, but currently languishing down in 8th, sandwiched by the two Mercedes cars. Hamilton this time in front of Russell, but Russell didn't really get a competitive lap time on the board, so expect that to improve right now. Ricciardo, though, in that, having trailed his teammate for most of the sessions, is ahead of him right now in 4th, ahead of Norris in 6th. And if he can keep that, well, I think we'll hear the fans absolutely explode with cheering for their homeboy hero in 4th.
Yeah, they're a lot closer to each other this weekend, which will give Ricciardo a lot of confidence. And if he can find a way in front, that will boost him no end. You know, from a psychological perspective, we talked earlier about him potentially having doubts starting to creep in about his own performance and that how destructive that can be in the longer term. If he can find his way past his teammate Lando Norris at the end of this session, that will boost his hopes no end.
Well, as we still await for Q3 to get underway, let's hear from Lance Stroll, who crashed out of Q3 with Nicholas Latifi. He's been speaking to Lawrence Barretto.
Hey Lance, great job by the team to get the car out, and then I guess just frustrating with the way it all ended. Just talk me through it.
Yeah, big thanks to the guys. I mean, they worked really hard, and it's a shame we had a terrible day, but yeah, it was a very awkward situation what happened on a cool down lap, and Nicholas let me go, and then the track falls to the right there, and as he accelerated, it felt, like I said, it falls to the right and gets very narrow, and the timing was just really bad, I guess, and yeah, that's what caused the collision.
Were you expecting him to go that way around you?
He went all of a sudden, very suddenly, and like I said, it falls to the right, so the car kind of dips to the inside as the track falls away there, and I think the timing was just terrible. As he was accelerating, the track was falling to the right for me, and that's where we made contact.
Right, hard luck, thank you.
Yeah, well, you can hear the desperation, I suppose, in Lance Stroll's voice. Not happy with how that's panned out, and what's been a pretty miserable weekend so far for Aston Martin. Jenny Gow.
Yeah, both drivers have now been summoned to the stewards. They will go there at 6 o'clock local time, so after qualifying finishes, and they will both plead their case of why they think the other man is in the wrong. Let's see what the stewards decide. But who are you backing, Latifi or Stroll? Come on, money where your mouth is.
For me, I think if the stewards want to find one person to blame, for me it's Lance Stroll in that one. But it was tricky. To give a little bit of credit to Lance, there was a massive closing speed. As I said earlier, Latifi came through a gap that was definitely big enough, and he had every right to go for it, but he came very, very quickly, and I can understand perhaps why Lance Stroll wasn't expecting that to happen, having had Latifi just let him through. So there are perhaps some mitigating circumstances, but the Williams of Latifi was well alongside, almost past the Aston Martin at the point the Aston Martin turned in. So if you want to look for blame, it's probably got to lie with Lance Stroll, I would say.
Well, let's hear from the other side. Nicholas Latifi has been speaking about it with Lawrence Barretto.
Thanks, Nicky. Just sorry about that. Didn't look like it was your fault out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it felt like from behind the wheel, and then just before coming here to the media pen, I've just seen the video as well, and kind of even confirms that, what my feeling was. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's quite clear. I mean, I let him by because I was told he was on a push lap. He obviously must have backed off a corner or two before. And then, yeah, I just kind of wanted to get back by him to carry on with my cool-down lap and get my tire preparation correct. There was a gap, big gap at the time. I went for it, and then for whatever reason, once I got alongside him, he decided to turn in. So, yeah, not much more to say besides that.
Kind of thing you'll go and chat about with him later on?
I mean, I'm sure we're both going to get called to the stewards, but I mean, there's not really anything to say. I mean, seeing the video, it's clearly his fault. He probably wasn't looking in the mirrors on the cool-down lap, or both on cool-down laps, fine, but I mean, still not my fault. I mean, clearly turned into me, so yeah, I don't think there's going to really be anything needing to be said, to be honest.
And just a big job for the guys at the team to get the car ready for tomorrow. Yeah,
that's the biggest thing. It's a lot of damage. I mean, it was such a small impact in terms of the actual crash itself, but it just has such big consequences because of how the crash was, doing quite a few corners, and yeah, it's a shame. Obviously coming off of a few crashes as well, so it's the last thing I would have wanted, but you know, it's just bad luck.
All right, well, I'm glad you're okay. Good luck tomorrow.
Well, Nicholas Latifi not mincing his words, firmly placing the blame on Lance Stroll there, but that incident will be investigated after qualifying, so keep a lookout on BBC Sport for the updates on that. Right, Q3 is back underway. 5 minutes and 55, 4, 3, 2, 1, 50 seconds on the clock. The two Mercedes are out there straight away as well, of Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. Max Verstappen in the garage, just the tyres being put on.
Lewis getting very slow.
George Russell complaining about, just stating that Lewis Hamilton perhaps going a little bit too slow in front of him as well.
Well, I was just going to say, two Mercedes out on circuit together on the same patch of circuit. They're the only ones out in that sector of the racetrack at all, and yet they were running very close to each other. So there, George perhaps complaining that the reason that's happening is Lewis going slowly, but they're coming to the end of the lap now, coming through the final two corners, still almost behind each other. Lewis Hamilton crossing the line first to start a lap, perhaps just a second warm-up lap for the two Mercedes. That seems to be a feature of that car this weekend. Indeed, George Russell still weaving to warm the tyres up. So another lap of preparation for the tyres before we see outright performance from them as the Ferraris prepare to make their way out of the garage.
Running that closely on track, even though it's just a warm-up lap for the two Mercedes, could they be trying something where they could give each other a bit of a boost and slipstream each other like we always see in Monza, for instance? Is that worth anything around here? Are the straights long enough? Of course, we've got more powerful DRS this year, so that added to a bit of extra slipstream from your teammate could well yield plentiful lap times.
A toe will always help you, but it's so difficult to orchestrate, and I'd say on this circuit even more so than somewhere like Monza or Baku, where you've got an incredibly long flat-out straight section. So to pull it off is often more risk than it would be worth in terms of the gain that you'd get from it. So I'd be very surprised if that's what they're trying to do, even though they're in sort of desperate situations. It sounded from George's comments, though, that he wasn't particularly prepared for something like that to happen, so we'll see.
You're hearing the sounds of Sergio Perez coming through Sector 1, personal best. It's about 7 thousandths off the ultimate first sector time, which is held at the moment. The fastest through the first sector is his teammate, Max Verstappen. Here's George Russell.
So he's getting tight on time now. So Lewis will pick it up.
Yeah, tell Lewis to speed up. Yeah, copy.
It is getting a bit tight on time, isn't it? 3 minutes and 22, 21, 20 seconds out for this Q3 session for the battle for pole position and the top 10 grid spots. Fernando Alonso crashed out during his first flying attempt, so only 9 cars taking part, but at the moment we've only got 1, 2, 3, 4 cars out on track. Sergio Perez crossing the line in a few moments' time. Personal bests in Sector 1 and Sector 2. Crosses the line, can't improve, but a thousandth of a second down sees him go into second.
This is incredibly close. 1,000th of a second. Sergio Perez currently sits behind Charles Leclerc, and we know that just before that red flag came out, Carlos Sainz, nothing in it between him and Leclerc either, so the top 4 are split by almost nothing, and we're now properly at the business end of this qualifying session. 2.5 minutes to go.
It really is a thousandth of a second splitting the top 2 at the moment. On board with Lewis Hamilton, who dips a tyre onto the grass but carries the speed forward into the braking zone of the penultimate corner. A little couple of goes on the steering wheel, trying to keep it as smooth as he can. DRS on out the final corner. What can Lewis Hamilton deliver as he crosses the line? It's 5th with a 1:19.0. His teammate crosses right behind him, but it's 4th for George Russell with a 1:19.0. They are split currently by Daniel Ricciardo, who's on an outlap. 2 minutes to go here in Q3. It's Leclerc on top at the moment, but there is nothing between him and currently Sergio Perez in the Red Bull.
Absolutely, yeah. Lewis Hamilton then with the best lap that he thinks he could get there, but it's still, nearly a second off. 7-8 tenths off the lead pair, so nowhere near the performance they've been used to over the past few years. Slightly ragged running wide on his lap around towards the final part of that this Albert Park circuit. So Mercedes out of the picture in terms of pole position here, but Red Bull and Ferrari very much in it. Verstappen now on a flyer into the early part of the lap. It's Charles Leclerc that currently tops the timesheets with his teammate, the Red Bull teammate Sergio Perez, with nothing between them.
Absolutely, just a minute to go in Q3. Charles Leclerc currently leads the way. It's a thousandth of a second between him and Sergio Perez in the Red Bull in the battle for pole position. This is going to set the grid, of course, for the top 10 of these positions. 10th currently occupied by Fernando Alonso, but he's out of this. He's crashed out. Verstappen, you're hearing now, at the moment, not going any quicker. He's currently sitting in 3rd, but he's going slow in Sector 1 and Sector 2. He's still trying to deliver as much speed as he can out of that number 1 Red Bull car. Meanwhile, Charles Leclerc has just gone fastest overall in the first sector. Sainz going well as well, but what can the reigning champion, the Dutchman, Max Verstappen, do out of the final corner and across the line? Can he deliver? Yes, he can. It's provisional pole for Max Verstappen.
Here comes Carlos Sainz then to follow up. What can he do. Not enough for the second Ferrari. Over a second off the pace, but it's Charles Leclerc who currently sits second, coming towards turn 11. Through he goes, nice and tidy then, towards the end of this lap. The first sector was faster than anybody. The second sector was a personal best. He comes through the penultimate corner, nice and tidy, out of turn 14, and onto the start-finish straight. Is this the lap that delivers pole position? Charles Leclerc crosses the line, and yes, pole position for the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. What a lap.
Beautiful lap. The Ferrari engineers applaud their man. Charles Leclerc takes provisional pole. Nearly 0.3 of a second ahead of Max Verstappen. Sergio Perez has crossed the line. He won't get another lap time in. He is in third ahead of Norris, who snuck up to fourth in that. Lewis Hamilton still going fast at the moment, but only personal bests right now. Hamilton sitting in seventh. He's behind his teammate. Daniel Ricciardo sits in sixth. Russell improves his time, but not his position in fifth. What can Hamilton do? Crosses the line. He does improve. He goes fifth behind Norris and ahead of his teammate George Russell. Ricciardo sits in seventh. Esteban Ocon is in eighth. Carlos ninth. Carlos Sainz is only ninth. So the top three on pole is Charles Leclerc ahead of Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez.
Let's go. Oh, nice lap. Nice lap.
It was a nice lap from Charles Leclerc. Absolutely blistering performance when it mattered. And didn't he pull it out the bag with a significant gap to Verstappen, who had a lap that was on the ragged edge. His teammate Sergio Perez, who's looked even faster at times than Verstappen, only in third, but not a lot between them. Lando Norris in P4. What a stunning lap from him. And the biggest disappointment, I would say, of that whole session, Carlos Sainz. What happened to him? All the way down in ninth after showing some really good early promise.
It's a real shocker for Carlos Sainz, 1.5 seconds off the pace as well. Mightily impressive though from Lando Norris to get up there. Daniel Ricciardo, excellent to see him up in Q3, his first Q3 appearance of the year too. McLaren's first double Q3 appearance this year. But your top three, Charles Leclerc taking his 11th pole position in his Formula One career, ahead of Max Verstappen, the reigning champion, and Sergio Perez makes it 2 Red Bulls in the top three. It is very much Ferrari versus Red Bull once again, but Mercedes much improved in 5th and 6th. They can do some work from there. It remains to be seen how well we can overtake round this revised Albert Park circuit in Melbourne. But the first qualifying session in 3 years at the Australian Grand Prix has just finished. And it is Leclerc on top. Jenny Gow, have you caught your breath? I need to catch mine.
That was frenetic, wasn't it? It was good. The first non-Mercedes pole position since 2013 at Albert Park, and that was Sebastian Vettel in a Red Bull. It's not a Red Bull on pole, is it? Charles Leclerc there. But what happened to Sainz? Qualifying in 9th in that Ferrari as Leclerc takes the plaudits and the applause. That is a bizarre qualifying for him.
It really is bizarre, and he will be very, very upset with that as well. Carlos Sainz is one of those drivers that all the engineers love as well, because he's very much engineer-minded, unlike a lot of the other drivers. So he really envisions the lap, and he knows where he can get more lap time. But 9th, and then pole for his teammate. Something must have gone wrong in that lap, surely.
Something must have gone wrong. We didn't see it on our screen, so as soon as we find out what that is, we'll of course let you know. But what's most disappointing about that was 2 meters before that red flag came out earlier in the session, Carlos Sainz was on a lap that would have put him comparable with his teammate Charles Leclerc. He was on a blistering lap, fastest I think in the middle sector at that stage. So he has the performance, he has the pace, it just didn't work out for him when it really mattered.
Well, let's hear from our top three with Johnny Herbert, who's with Max Verstappen.
Well, I'm down here with Max Verstappen. Max, second position. How do you feel after that run?
Yeah, not good. I didn't really feel good in the car the whole weekend so far. I think there's not been one lap where I actually felt confident, so bit of a struggle. Of course, second is still a good result, but yeah, just not feeling that great to go to the limit. So we'll try to analyze it.
Yeah, it seems to be a bit of a theme for you. I know yesterday you were complaining a little bit this morning, but what about race pace? Is that where it's going to be slightly different, do you think? Do you think the balance will come to you?
Yeah, well, probably in the race pace everything stabilizes a bit, but for me, this weekend so far has been all over the place. Of course, happy to be second, but of course, I think also as a team, we want more.
Right. Thanks, Max. Sergio. Hi, mate. Third position after that brilliant pole position you had in Saudi. How did it feel today?
Yeah, it felt good. Q1, Q2, things were going good. With all the red flags, it's always very hard to keep the momentum going. I regret a bit the decision we took going into Q3 with our strategy on the tires, but I think, P3 is a decent start for tomorrow.
And this must be so good for your motivation, getting a pole position, bit of a frustration in the race in Saudi. Third here, tomorrow, second row, feeling good with the race pace of the car?
Yeah, hopefully. I think we got a nice race ahead of us, so first of all, I hope we make a lot of Aussies very happy tomorrow because they are, full grandstands already on Saturday, so yeah, hopefully tomorrow we can give them a nice race.
Right, well done, Sergio. And your pole man, everybody. Charles Leclerc, second pole of the season. How did that feel? That looked like an epic lap from you. How was it?
Yeah, it felt good. Even more because it's a track where I've always struggled in the past as a driver. I don't know, it probably doesn't fit me as well. And this weekend we really worked hard. It was a bit messy for the three practices session for me. I managed to do some good laps, but not everything together. And in Q3 I managed to put everything together, so it feels great, and very happy to be starting on pole tomorrow.
Yeah, and it's a great position obviously to start on pole position, sandwiched by the two Red Bulls, but you've been on the pace basically all the way through sort of yesterday and today now with that pole position. For the race, how do you feel the car set up? Because when I see it on track, she looks nice to drive, is she?
Yeah, the car is nice to drive, but the Red Bull were very quick in FP2 during the long fuel run. But to be honest, we were again quite surprised by our pace in qualifying. So everything is possible tomorrow. We just need to do a good start, and then hopefully we can keep that first position.
Yeah, well, I think it's been a very popular pole position. That crowd went well for you. Well done.
So Charles Leclerc is the man in pole position with his Ferrari. He'll be alongside Max Verstappen on the front row with Perez and Norris in P4 and Hamilton and Russell. So a nice little trio of Brits for you in positions 4, 5 and 6, and something I don't think many people would have expected. Daniel Ricciardo will start the homeboy in P7 with Ocon, Sainz, and let's see what happens with Alonso. An unfortunate accident for him with a hydraulics failure, it seems like, so plenty of talking points after this. Perez, remember, has been summoned to the stewards for that double yellow and not slowing down. So plenty of stories to keep you going. Log on to the BBC Sport website to keep you up to date with all of it. We will have a podcast coming as well, so make sure you download the Checkered Flag podcast, subscribe to it as well. Takes out one of the jobs, means you don't have to download it each time. So we'll bring you that in a little while. And remember, coverage tomorrow. Set your alarm clocks. It will be worth it. 5:45 our coverage begins with the race getting underway from Melbourne at 6 a.m. Yes, 6 a.m. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you've enjoyed your Saturday from Melbourne. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.